right? If you want to be a surgeon, right, you've got to study for like 6-8 years, and then you've got to do residency, and then you've got to do this, and then you've got to do that before they'll get you anywhere near a scalpel and cut somebody up, right? But if you want to be a marketer, right, all you need is like a MacBook Pro and a Creative Cloud subscription and sitting in the corner of Starbucks with your flat white in your hand, and you can call yourself a marketer.
Are you tired of working more for less profits in your home service business? What if I could show you $100,000 in hidden annual profits in your business in less than 3 minutes? Would you be interested? And not only show you where, but how to create that 100K in 6 months or less without additional advertising or marketing spend guaranteed. Just go to sharpenthespearcoaching.com to see how truly simple it is. That's sharpenthespearcoaching.com. Do it now. And we are back on STS Sharpen the Spear podcast with another incredible guest. I've got Gee. I'm just going to call him Gee because I like that. And Gee, as we always do on STS, no one knows Gee better than Gee. Gee, backstory, bring us up to speed, and we are going to get into an incredible conversation.
Thank you. Well, firstly, thank you for having me on. I do appreciate it. Delighted to be invited, as I say. So, yeah, hi, everyone. My name's Gee Ranasinha. I run a marketing agency by the name of Kexino. We're a team of marketing, creative and business development specialists that work with startups and small businesses, combining strategy, branding, and the novel combination really is introducing something called behavioral science into the mix. And that is primarily there, obviously, like any good marketing agency. The goal here is to increase clients' awareness, reputation, trust, and most of all, sales. Because, sales is the name of the game, right? Sales is what it's all about. If it's not selling, it's not marketing, it's fluff. So we've been going for 17 odd years. Over that time, we've worked with about 400 clients. We are 19 people in 9 countries. We've been in a distributed working environment since day one, which 17 odd years ago was quite a novel idea. Today it's pretty commonplace. But even though the agency, is, theoretically it's based in Europe, 90% of our clients are in North America. Don't ask me why. I don't know why. Not that I'm complaining. I'm very grateful. Apparently, I don't know if you've heard of this thing, Richard. There's this thing called the interwebs. And
wait, let me check my reference book. Yes, I see it there. The interwebs. Yes.
You probably have to look it up in your encyclopedia. I think it's sort of listed there.
It's on the other wall.
And right. And apparently this interweb thingy, it's not just a flash in the pan. Apparently it really works. B2B businesses primarily, up to around 25 million revenue. That's really our sweet spot. If they're startups, then they're usually externally funded, either from private shareholders, startup accelerators, VCs, this sort of stuff. Yeah, and that's us.
I love it. Anyone who's been in marketing 17 years, I'd say anything past the 5-year mark is pretty good. And just for the record, and my listeners, as they know, you will not hear a lot of marketers on my show. Okay, I'm selective about who I'm going to speak to, and I do that because anyone in business has probably been burned by a marketer in one way or another. And there's 1,000 different ways. The term marketing is a very big umbrella, right? So it covers a lot of different things. Everyone's got a niche and this and that. So I'm just, for me, and again, for my listeners and in general, I really want someone who's like you, Gee, who's going to bring the experience, bring the understanding. You're actually on the teaching level of this stuff as well and everything else. So you're going to bring a different viewpoint and a different results-oriented kind of approach that I love, right? Like talking about like making sales is what it's about, okay? Because honestly, there's marketers I talk to, that's not their goal, right?
And unfortunately, you're right. Yes, they think marketing is pretty pictures and brochures and events and stress balls and tote bags and raindrops on roses and whispers on kittens. I don't quite know what world they're coming from, and that really is one of my issues I have with what I call people who call themselves marketers. Not marketers,
Right.
people who call themselves marketers. And I make a distinction there because I don't think they're worthy of the name to be called a marketer. And that's because they have a skewed idea as to what the role of marketing is within the business. And I don't know if that's lack of education or experience, or if it's something to do with the role that sales or HR have in the hiring process, right? Because I don't think many people know what marketing is, and they think it's promotion because that's the 1/10 that sticks above the waterline, right? And they don't get involved with the research and the segmentation and the targeting, the positioning, the messaging, and all of that good stuff that sort of sits beneath the waterline.
Yeah, I'll boil it down. When they're into, like you said, the pretty pictures and all that stuff and the promotion, I'm just going to call them, they're lazy. Okay. They're lazy. That's like, who can't do that? I could get pictures. I can do it. I mean, and I know I'm being it's a very broad brush I'm painting with here, but it seems like they don't, any business owner, you know what we want? ROI. It's simple. I give you this. You're going to give me what? I'm going to get what? It's a very simple equation. Okay. I put this much in. How much do I get out? Okay. That's what I need to know. I'm not concerned about, in general, the how. Okay. I don't want to spend a lot of time in how you're going to do it. I want to know, here's the front, here's the outcome, here's my pain.
Right.
I'm not moving enough product. I'm not doing this, not reaching, whatever that is. Here's my pain. And my outcome, I want sunshine and rainbows. Okay. I want beautiful things with dollar signs sprinkled all over. Okay.
Right. And I think that's one of the delicate issues that needs to be addressed by marketing when talking to non-marketers. I'll call them civilians, non-marketers. Okay.
I like it.
Because there's an issue. Marketers have a marketing problem in that they don't, when they're talking to non-marketers, if they're talking to finance or C-suite or even sales, they don't adapt their language according to the people that they're speaking with, which is quite ironic, really, because that's a key point of marketing when you're actually doing it to customers. So we get involved with all of this jargon and verbiage and acronyms that we love to use within our little clique, but it's stuff that scares other people half to death and doesn't really mean anything to the average. If you look at the average C-suite person, they've probably come from a finance background, an economics background, an engineering type background. It's very cause and effect, very, there's a straight line between input and output. Okay. And that works for pretty much every other area of the business, whether you're talking about manufacturing or even R&D or certainly finance. The thing is, when you get to marketing, the units of measurement are a little bit more wacky than they are in economics or engineering or these matter-of-fact type disciplines that are used within the business. I mean, look, if we take manufacturing as example, supposing you are a business making widgets, okay? Now, if you want to increase the productivity of your business, there are a number of things you can do. You can get a faster widget making machine. You can put on more staff to run the machine more often across shifts. You could tap a cheaper supplier of the raw materials for your widgets, so the cost per widget is reduced. These are all sort of and it's clear that by doing any of these things has a direct implication as to the productivity of the system, right? Optimizing pieces of the system results in the system as a whole being more efficient. Unfortunately, marketing doesn't work that way. And it doesn't work that way for two reasons. Firstly, like I mentioned earlier, the units that we're using to communicate the effectiveness of marketing aren't standardized, easily measurable units that can be communicated across business units. Okay? For example, if we're talking about engineering, okay, a centimeter is always a centimeter. A kilogram is always a kilogram. I know these are alien terms to
yes,
Americans, right? For some Americans want to use the imperial units for certain things, but then when you get involved with things like drugs, then everybody talks about kilos.
Yes,
And
it's
then
an
all of
odd
a sudden
thing.
everybody knows what kilograms are. It's
Yes,
amazing.
I
Anyway,
don't
that's not
know.
the point.
But
The
G,
point
one
is,
thing, let me throw this in there, G. Let me throw
Tell
this
me.
in there. So we talk about a governmental thing, right? Our government, the U.S. government, almost never stops spending money on anything. A little different right today. Okay, we got a little new thing going on. But up until this point, the only thing they ever stopped funding for was teaching the metric system. They finally gave up. It was the only thing that's defeated the government until like Elon showed up. It's just want to throw that in there because it's kind of comical.
So yeah, so across the rest of the world, apart from the US, everybody knows what a kilogram is. Okay, it's a standardized SI unit of measurement, and a kilogram in London is the same as a kilogram in Cape Town, is the same as a kilogram in Singapore as it is in Adelaide. Okay, we all know what we're talking about. The thing is, the levers that we're pulling in marketing aren't always such standardized units of measurement, because some of the levers that we can pull are behavioral based, they're emotional based, right? For example, the context and the emotional state you're in can affect your buying decisions, right? Emotional influences that can influence the buying decision are things like fear or pride or ego or anger. These, in your particular frame of mind, can influence your purchasing decision. You look at the insurance industry, pretty much the entire insurance industry is founded on fear. So when you have these types of curveballs thrown in, marketing needs to do a better job of communicating the efficacy of a particular campaign or series of campaigns by translating this woolliness, this intangibility into the language of the business, which is the language of finance, right? And we don't do that. So what happens is the C-suite think marketing are a bunch of weirdo lunatics, right? Who are all sort of West Coast tie-dye, living in mountain retreats, sitting under pyramids and, believing in the power of the crystal, right?
Right.
So we don't do ourselves any favors. We don't go about it with the right framework and the right slant on what we're talking about. So that's number one. I'd contest that most marketers are lazy. I just think most marketers, or people who call themselves marketers, haven't been hired correctly. Because, like I said, the perception of marketing is promotion, pretty pictures, right? And all of the other stuff in marketing doesn't seem to get a look in. And I think that's because marketing hires probably above any other senior management role. The bar to entry is extremely low, right? The vast majority of people with marketing in their job title have no formalized education in marketing. No real experience in marketing outside of the tactical promotional stuff that we've just mentioned. So they don't know what they don't know, right? So it's all, we're putting the cart before the horse. We're making some noise, we're waving our hands and jumping up and down without having done the basics. So it's not so surprising when our stuff falls flat on its face, because we've built a house on I don't know, on sand, right?
Yeah.
It was bound to fall over. It's just a question
So
of when.
what's kind of the cure? I mean, obviously you can take a company that understands that, right? So now their low bar is raised relatively high because they have a different expectation of who comes on the team. Like, I get that. Is that really the only cure? Is to find that? And is there enough skilled marketers, okay, with that level of expertise to fill these gaps in employment?
Yes, I think there are definitely very well educated, proficient people within marketing. But just like any senior management hire, you get what you pay for, right? Now, there isn't like a qualification like there is in certain other industries, unfortunately, right? If you want to be a CPA, right, you've got to study for years, you've got to pass exams, right? You get letters after your name, you get audited, and you have a sort of standards that you need to maintain and all the rest of it, right? If you want to fly a plane, right, you need to take so many hours lessons, right? And you need to keep up to date with certain bits and pieces before they let you anywhere near a cockpit, right? If you want to be a surgeon, right, you've got to study for like 6-8 years, and then you've got to do residency, and then you've got to do this, and then you've got to do that before they'll get you anywhere near a scalpel and cut somebody up, right? But if you want to be a marketer, right, all you need is like a MacBook Pro and a Creative Cloud subscription and sitting in the corner of Starbucks with your flat white in your hand, and you can call yourself a marketer. I mean, I'm being a little bit, pedantic here. Maybe I'm just, but I think the point is well made. The bar is set really low, and as a result, we're letting in the wrong people to do the wrong job, because the hiring expectations is at a promotional tactical level. The hire thinks that marketing is promotionally tactical based. And so when the whole thing implodes, everybody's finger pointing, and eventually, the marketing gets thrown under the bus. Right. So yes, it comes down to finding people who know what marketing is, who have experience in what marketing is, and know all of that other stuff that I mentioned earlier on, before we get to the tactical stuff.
Right. So I remember years ago, because I've always been in kind of the digital space, if you will, with coaching and doing other things for a number of years, not always, not as long as you by any means, but I've watched kind of the evolution of it. And then one of the bigger companies I know you're familiar with, I think, is Digital Marketer. And they've got that. They started doing certifications for these different aspects of marketing. So you can actually go in and you get certified, whatever that was. I didn't do it. Okay. But I thought that was unique at the time. This was probably 5-6 years ago, maybe longer. Mm-hmm. But they started like, hey, you can actually get a certification. Like, we're going to take you through a program. You're going to learn how to do this aspect of marketing, this aspect, and you can put those icons on your little thing. So I don't ever know what happened with all of that, if that's still around. But it's almost like when you talk about trade schools, where I can go become a welder and I become a plumber. Yeah. Like, that needs to happen. I think in marketing, like, there needs to be a place to go, like, and have some standard. Is there? I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
There are organizations. I mean, the AMA in the US is probably the biggest organization. There's a thing called a CIM in Europe. There are plenty of three-letter acronyms in this industry, but there are plenty of marketing qualifications that you can take, but they're not mandatory. And they don't necessarily mean that much. But it's interesting that you mentioned the D word, because there is a assumption that marketing means digital marketing, which I'd push back on for a number of reasons. And I think it's important to make the distinction, because number one, I think using the word digital is largely superfluous today, right? Because at the end of the day, everything is digital. TV is digital, billboards are digital, print is digital, right? But more than that, I think by categorizing a person or an agency as being digital does a disservice to the work and certainly the outlook. It's putting a barrier up, because talking about a digital marketer or a digital marketing agency is nonsensical. You might as well say an electrical agency. Of course we use electricity, but should that be what defines us? I don't think it should. It's not about digital marketing, whatever that is. It's about marketing in a digital world. And I think those two positions are very different, and I don't think they're interchangeable. But I think worse than that is that the phrase digital marketing, digital marketer, digital marketing agency puts the focus on the wrong thing. Okay? Because in this case, digital isn't a attributive noun. It's certainly not an adjective. Digital is a channel. Okay? So for us, we don't call that, we are not a digital marketing agency. We're a marketing agency that uses the most appropriate channels of communication to address a client's target audience group. End of. If that's digital, it may be digital, but it may not be digital, right? Have you heard of Maslow's hammer, or the law of the instrument?
Yes.
Okay. It's paraphrased as, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Right? So, if you're coming at a problem as a digital marketer, you're looking to solve the problem digitally. But sometimes that's not the best way to solve the problem. There are other things you can do which may not be digital, but since you're only looking at it through a digital lens, everything must be solved in that way. Do you see what I mean?
No, exactly. I think you're right on point with that. And that's a really great distinction, because I've had marketers and I go to do this and they're pitching me, I'll go through the process, from a digital standpoint, but on a certain platform, hey, we're going to get you this, we're going to get you these calls and everything else. And I'm like, I don't think my clients are on that platform. Okay. But they insist they are. There's a billion people. There's all blah, blah. They're going to get this, right? And they don't produce. They can't get them. I'm like, because they're not there. They're over here. So the burr under the saddle really is, well, all you had to say is like, you're right. They're probably not there, but I know where they are. Let me help you there. Because there's still the same thing, but they're so, like you're saying, they're so pigeonholed. They're so tunnel focused on this platform. We do this, we match this, that everybody's like, they all fit. They're everything's a nail, right? I was a nail.
Pony.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
they know one thing and they just try to shoehorn everything into this one recipe, which worked with a client at one particular time, right? Where, the stars aligned and it all sort of worked out for them. But that doesn't necessarily follow for anything else. For example, supposing you are targeting 85-year-old retired pastors from Arkansas, right? You probably wouldn't use TikTok. Now, that's no disrespect to the 85-year-old retired pastors from Arkansas who are boogieing along to TikTok and having a wonderful following. But I don't reckon there's many of them, right? So it's being where the prospective buyer expects us to be and not where they don't expect us to be. It's not a question of just being there because we think using these channels are cheap. They're not cheap. They're just different expensive. The cost is further along in the chain or further upstream, whichever way you want to look at it. And we're not doing that. So we're doing this scattergun approach, which we're using a 12-bore shotgun for everything, hoping that we'll hit the target, right?
Yeah, I also think, I'm going to kind of throw out this word, I think there has to be a level of integrity. Okay. When you're dealing with them, like what you're saying, you're describing integrity, like that's not going to work. Like I'd love to take your $10,000 and run all this for 3 months and produce nothing and never give you back your money. Or I could that's not going to work with this. I see this. Or let's dive deeper into your ICP. Let's go into these different things. You've got your onboarding sheets and everything else. And I give you tons of detail and you're still sticking there. I'm like, that's what you don't get. But I think from an integrity standpoint, if you have this viewpoint that you do, you're able to direct them where they need to go, right? What's the most optimal? Like you said, that the cost it's not irrelevant, but it's going to be basically this, like you said, a different expensive. I think that's the case. There isn't like, you don't get to go, and I could be, correct me if I'm wrong. It's like, well, let me do the cheap version. You buy cheap, buy twice. That's kind of my philosophy, right?
Yeah.
I'm not looking to spend a ton of money, but I don't want someone trying to sell me because it's cheap. Like those people frighten me. They tell me how little I have to spend. Yeah. I'm like, I don't trust you.
I think that comes down to playing the role of the expert, and also from a client perspective, not self-diagnosing. Let me explain what I mean. Many times we will get a call by a small business owner saying, I need you to produce X for me, right? Whatever it may be. Ad campaign or a promo video or a website. Let's use a website as an example. We need a new website. Why do you need a new website? We need a new website because we're not getting any leads from our old website. So then I'll obviously I'll take a look at their website, and occasionally we'll see an absolute abomination of a website. But to be honest, those cases are getting fewer and far between. Right? Especially with all of these subscription-based websites with template modules that keep you, okay, they don't allow you to do many things, but you get something that's passable, that's half decent. right? Quite easily. And the problem is not one of design or user experience or images or speed or SEO or any of that. The problem is nobody's actually spent time doing the only thing that matters on any website, which is the text, the copy, right? And the reason why people don't spend that time on that bit is because that bit's hard, right? That's the hard bit, getting that stuff right. And so the very fact that a business owner has come to me and said, we want a website. And I said, well, actually, maybe you don't need a website. Maybe you just need a better converting existing website. No. This is what I want. This is my budget. Can you do it? How long will you take? Blah, blah, blah. At which point we walk away because we know that it's just a matter of time before they get a nice new lick of paint on their website and it's, flash, bang, wallop, nice, latest technologies in the background and there's things flying around and there's explosions and car crashes and there's a Michael Mann film and all this stuff's going on and it all's great. But now you've just got a nicer looking website that still doesn't convert. Exactly. And who's gonna get thrown under the bus? Right? Muggins. Yep. Here, right? It's just not going to work. The issue is having the trust in the expert that you're asking to do the task. Okay? Supposing, let me use an example. Supposing I wake up one morning and I have a pain in my chest and I go to see my doctor. I've obviously looked up online just to see what pain in the chest could be, which is the scariest thing to do. You should never, ever do that, right. That sort of thing, right? And you go to the doctor and you get to sit down and you say to the doctor, I've got a pain in my chest. I must have angina. Please prescribe me some angina medication, please. Thank you very much. Right? What's the doctor going to say? He's going to say, yeah, to freaking mind, right? The doctor's what he's going to do. He's going to ask you a bunch of questions, right? He's going to run some tests. He may take a blood sample, may take a urine sample, send this off to the lab, and then you come back, and then based upon the questions that he's asked, the tests that he's run, he'll come up with a diagnosis. And he'll turn around and say, okay, you know what? We've got the blood work back. We've got all the tests are clear. You don't actually have angina. The reason why you have a chest pain is because you had too much spicy food last night and you actually got gas. Self-diagnosing. You're putting your faith in the doctor to solve the problem. Your job is not to solve the problem. Your job is to tell him where it hurts. And it's the doctor's job to prescribe a solution to your problem. Now, you could ignore the doctor's solution. You could go and get a second opinion. That's your prerogative. But it's the doctor's job to propose a solution. So it's not up to you to tell me what you think your marketing problem is. If you're not educated or experienced in marketing, no, you might be right. But I can't tell you that you're right without having done some diagnosis of my own, asking a bunch of questions, looking at your total addressable market, looking at your existing collateral, looking at your sales process, look at all of these basic sort of things. And then I can come back and tell you, well, actually, you think the problem's here, but actually the problem's further upstream, right? And it may be easier to solve, it may be more difficult to solve, right? It may be more systemic. But we need to find the underlying business problem that needs to be addressed, which may be presenting itself as a symptom with a poorly converting website. Do you see what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, I think, and you're right about the upstream, downstream, and this is what I see a lot too with my clients is you have to look at, okay, I got lead gen. We'll take lead gen. Okay, I've got these leads coming in, and then what is, well, they're not converting. Well, why? Because they're bad leads. Well, are they? You talk about downstream. Well, what's next? You got a lead. How do you turn them into a prospect? How do you turn them into a client? What's your client? What's your sales process? What's this? Right? You have to look at all that other stuff. You can't just say could be bad leads. Okay. But let's say they're good leads. Okay. And they're average leads. How are you converting them? What's the process that is going through? Like you said, who's ever generating these leads? What did that look like? Where did it begin? Like you're saying, what's the top of the funnel? What's the middle? What's this whole process? So you're exactly right. It's just, but people love to pick up the one thing because they're paying for that and they're doing this. They don't understand it's a compound issue.
Yes. You can't look at elements of the system in isolation.
Right. Exactly. And I do it all the time because it just, I guess if you've done it well, it makes common sense. But for a lot of people, other entrepreneurs, like you said, they're very linear thinking. Yet at the same time, they're like, you haven't perfected the journey. You don't have the process down to take them all the way through. You got someone really good dumping in the top of the funnel, but you got no one to take it out of the bottom. It's plugged up.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the issue, and they won't address that because that's like really hard work.
Yes.
You can go,
it's hard
actually,
work.
lead gen's not super difficult. It's the rest that's the problem.
Yeah, and it takes a long time, and it takes a number of iterations before you get close enough to the target, right? Because at the beginning, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what the levers are that we need to pull to actually generate a qualified lead, a sales qualified lead, right? Not a marketing qualified lead. Okay. We don't know that yet. And especially, I find it especially common with founder CEOs, people who started a company and they're now CEO and they're still there. And, for a number of years, the business ran without any marketing at all. Because, the individual concerned is usually a very sort of dynamic, forceful personality with a large network, and he or she tapped their network for the first few years. That was enough to, keep the wolf from the door, put a little bit away in the bank account. And so they were led into the illusion that marketing was a cost rather than actually part of the value creation process of the business, as valued as having electricity in the factory, for God's sake, right? Or a roof over the building. You can't run the business without it. It's not an option. It's not like, heated seats or power steering or something, right? It's having a steering wheel. And so they look at marketing with disdain. And like I said, as marketers, we don't really do a very good job of bursting that bubble. We actually reinforce that by the way that we talk to the C-suite, because we don't know enough about the language of business. We don't talk board. We don't talk business.
Yeah, I think you're right, Gee, because think of this, and this is what you always hear. Okay. And I'm just going to put this out there as anyone in the marketing business, like, don't use this word. Okay. Don't say this sentence. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Like, I get it. I know what that means. Don't ever tell a C-suite person that. Okay. You need to word that differently. You need to describe that. As soon as they say that, I'm done. And not because they don't understand what it means, but you haven't, that's too ambiguous. Like, you need to define the process.
Yourself for the responsibility. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Hey. So I'm glad you agree, because I'm like, words matter. They have meaning. And it depends who you're talking to. Like, we'll get an SEO person and I'm like, it doesn't seem to be working. They'll show us all these, you mentioned earlier. I'm like, I'm looking at impressions and this, and they go, hey, I just go, impressions. That's cool. 1,500 like a day. Can I take those? Can I deposit them at the bank? How much are those worth? Well, they're worth nothing to me. Don't even mention that to me. That doesn't compute. That's nerd speak. Okay. That's for you guys. You get all tickled by those numbers. I know they probably mean something, but to me, as someone running the company, don't bother me with those numbers. I've had these conversations with some of these people. I'm like, how do you not know this? You deal with businesses. Who puts up with that? Like, I need like 3 numbers. Just give me some.
And this is the issue about terminology of marketers. Like, for instance, when marketers use the term ROI, that's a very, very different way of using that term compared to a finance person. A finance person does not think of ROI the way that a marketer does. And by using that word, makes us look dumb in front of the finance people. And it undermines our authority and our expertise within the subject matter that we're purport to be experts in. Marketers need to be more familiar with terms like, cash flow and balance sheets and EBITDA. EBITDA, right? Marketers couldn't even spell EBITDA, let alone tell you what it was, right?
Tricky.
And that's a and that's a real problem. Because unless you can translate this stuff, you're absolutely right. Oh, this campaign did really well. We got all of these impressions, all of these likes, all of these downloads of our ebook, and this, that, and the other. Okay, great. How many sales did we make as a direct result of our efforts compared to doing nothing? Would we have got these sales anyway if we did nothing? That's what we need to compare them, right? Now, there may be some correlation between visibility, page views, this, that, and the other, and sales. There may be some kind of assumptions that we can make, right? Over this amount to translates to an increased propensity to purchase in these particular geographical areas for this particular product, whatever it may be. But we need to do that conversion and then talk about, as a result of this, we've spent this, and the short-term result has been this, but since marketing has a accumulation effect over time, there's inertia within any campaign of marketing, right? What we do today, we see results tomorrow, next week, 6 months, 6 years, whatever the buying cycle is with a particular industry. At the same time, we're seeing the results of what marketing did yesterday, last week, last month, last year. So we need to factor that all into consideration before we can come up with any idea of the efficacy of a particular campaign. We can't do that otherwise. And as I said, we need to do that in comparison with the status quo, with doing nothing. And we don't do that. We just want to too busy congratulating ourselves, patting ourselves on the back and popping champagne corks when, great, some celebrity liked our LinkedIn post. Well, great, right. Wonderful. I'm very happy for you. Okay. But like you said, does that pay my mortgage? No. Does that keep the bills away? Does it keep the lights on? No. So it's irrelevant. Talk to me in language that I can understand.
Yeah, really, this is so important now, but I knew you'd get it. Okay, again, that's why I limit who comes on my show when it comes to marketing, because
oh, I'm privileged. Thank you for letting me on.
I mean it, because it's hard to have people on who are going to speak in terms. It's like it's inside baseball stuff. And I do it with my clients all the time because we're in the home services trades. Okay, you're a plumber. Don't talk to the customer like you're talking to a plumber. Okay, you don't have no idea what you're talking about. It sounds cool, but it's a foreign language. Okay,
and they don't care.
They don't care. It's like I said, you don't need to explain how you're going to fix it. My toilet has overflowed. There's a brown murky substance all over the floor. Okay, it doesn't seem to be going away. Okay, you don't have to tell me how. Just I'll be back in 2 hours. Have it done. Okay, that's all I want to know. That's all I want to know. How much, how long, and I'm out of here. Okay, call me when it's finished. Like, it's very simple. It's always, I tell people, and you probably do this too, know the customer's pain, understand it, be able to dig into it, and literally kind of press the wound a bit, right? And then you don't have to worry about how you're going to do it. Jump over to the outcome. The smiley face, the rainbows, the sunshine, right? All that. You're going to give them that. The bathroom will look like this when I'm finished. It'll be amazing. It'll smell like this and everything else. That's what they pay for.
And that's the point. That's what we're selling. We're not selling plumbing services.
Right.
You're
selling outcomes.
Understand what we're selling.
Yes.
We're selling a result. We're selling an outcome. That's all they care about. They don't care, what type of joint you use, whether you're using brass or steel and what kind of washers. I don't care. It's nonsense. It's minutiae. I don't care, right? Here's some money. When is it done? Like if I get somebody to come and paint my house, right? I don't care whether they take 2 days or 5 days to do it, as long as they do a good job, right? And I don't have to think about it again for X amount of years. I don't care what paint they use, the primer, the this, the that. That's their job because they're experts. Now, if they screw up, now we're talking with it's a different conversation. But that's why I'm not up a ladder with a paintbrush in my hand, because these guys do it for a living. So they obviously, hopefully know what they're doing. So we're buying a result. We're buying an outcome. You think about it. Even like, for instance, we don't have an hourly rate. Okay. We charge per project. Okay.
Love it.
So we say, okay, right? Because otherwise, when you charge by the hour, it's like a lawyer. You're frightened to call them because you know the meter's running, right? But we need to have those communication conversations because that's how we do better work. So we can't have those psychological obstacles in place. So we say, look, this is what we're doing. This is the scope of the project. This is how long it's going to take. These are the deliverables at the end of it. And this is how much it's going to cost. Assuming there's no scope creep, of course, right? Which there often is. Oh, but can we just throw? No, we can't just throw it. No, that's phase 2. We're doing phase 1, right? So by not having an hourly rate, we're setting a precedent with saying this is a result. And it makes sense. If you go to the cinema, to the movie theatre, it doesn't cost you more to see a longer movie than it does for a shorter movie, does it? Right? It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. You're buying the outcome. You're not buying my time. Right? Now, whether it takes me 1 hour, 10 hours, or 100 hours to do it, that's my problem. That's not your problem.
Yeah, I love it. I drive this home all the time because, again, a lot of my clients that I work with, they get stuck in this hourly rate thing, and then they go, I'm going to have 3 people here for 6 hours, and I'm like, why do you do that? I said, you could send 2 guys, get it done in 4 hours, but you told them 3 guys in 6 hours. You know what they're going to want? A discount. When old Johnny boy doesn't show up for the day and you got to get the job done anyways, now you're short a man a billable 2 hours. They're going to want the discount. They're looking out the window. Where's guy number 3? I say, well, you do it for outcomes. We're going to do this. It's going to look like this. We're going to do this, and it'll be done today. I didn't say 4 o'clock. I didn't say 2:35. Yeah. Today. That could be 11 a.m. And we get there at 8.
When we leave, it'll have been done.
That's right. Magnificent. Right? Everything will be just the way we said. So it's so important you understand that. I think what you're saying, I love what you're saying, G, because that's the mindset, because my goal is the proper outcome. It's not milking hours or getting done early, doing it in less hours. It's a mindset thing for your company as a marketer. It changes what you do because you're focused on the outcome. Guys aren't checking their watch all the time. Hey, we've only got 30 minutes. This has to be done. Otherwise, we're going to lose money. Okay? You bid it for the project. I love that.
The other mistake I think people do, lots, especially in the service industry, they do, is on their pricing, and they do cost plus X% when they calculate pricing rather than value. So it's like, these are much my costs. I'll mark it up X%. Hopefully I'm going to make a profit at the end of the day. This nonsense, right? That's not what customers are buying. Customers are buying value. They're buying a result, and that has a particular value in their mind. Hopefully is a lot higher than the pricing that you're putting together as a cost plus X%. But they're not looking at it. People are still not looking at it that way. It's, they're thinking they're running a bodega or something.
Yeah, I tell them, I say, listen, if you can deliver 4 times the value, they'll pay you twice as much as they will anyone else. I go, it's simple. Like, figure out what that is. What is high value? What does 4X value mean in your industry, in your service, in your whatever that means? Just because everyone else charges $99 a room to clean your carpets doesn't mean you can't charge $200.
Right.
You're just not selling the value of it. Okay, so you can do it. Warren
Buffett's quoted as saying, price is what you pay, value is what you get. And it's true.
That's it.
Right? Value-based pricing.
I was telling, who was I with yesterday? I was thinking, I can't remember if it was on a podcast or not, but I was talking about a roofer. I had a subcontractor. We were talking about subcontractor. I was in a workshop. And I said, well, I had this guy, a subcontractor in roofing. He goes, I want to, he wants to do like a roof every day. And he wants to be and this was quote, I want to be the Walmart of roofing. And I just looked at him, and his name was Dan. I go, Dan, I don't think of quality when I think of Walmart. You're covering my largest personal investment with no quality. And you want to be Walmart. I ain't putting Walmart on my roof. Okay. Yeah. And trust me, he did work like Walmart. So he was no longer a subcontractor for me. But it's those little things. It's that mindset. You think you're going to overcome this race to the bottom thing by being the lowest price or whatever. You said exactly right. It's something I preach all the time. We must be value driven. It's not features, it's benefits, right? Benefits mean value. That's what it means. How can you get the person to understand the value aspect of this? Because that's even, and I'll use this too, G. I have contractors who will just email an estimate to someone. They went out, so what do? They go right down to the bottom number. How much? They don't attach, they don't break that down. They don't go look, oh, it's this kind of wood, this, and they can't attach the value to it. So when contractor B comes and he's $1,000 cheaper, they just go with that because they're only comparing the number, right? So it's important to drive the value.
Especially service providers, they don't offer sufficient brand differentiation in the minds of the customer. A roofer is a roofer, a plumber is a plumber, right? And unless we can attach value-based relative differentiation relative to a different company and across a metric that means something to the prospective buyer, right, then unless we can do that, then the customer doesn't have a frame of reference in which to compare us to a competitor. So they revert back to a metric which they can compare, which is, of course, price. But as we know, no matter what you're selling, no matter who you're selling it to, there is always somebody somewhere who's prepared to sell it for less. And as soon as if you're seen as a commodity in the eyes of your buyers, then you're on that downward spiral. And that is a race that you do not want to win.
That's right. And I love hearing it from you. Okay. Because it's just, sometimes I feel like I'm just yelling in the wilderness sometimes, but it's always good to have, especially someone in the marketing industry, okay, who understands this, because they all say value proposition, unique selling, right, proposition, position, they all get that, but they don't finish. They don't actually demonstrate what that truly means, and I've been in front of so many people having they have the same conversation. The ones who get it, it's amazing. And I can show them testimony. Look, he was here in less than 12 months. He's here over double now for the kitchens. Was $43,000 average. Now is $93,000 average.
You don't want to be
doing a third of the work.
You want to be the Tiffany. You want to be the
That's
Apple, right?
Yes.
It's a lot more fun.
It's more fun. You enjoy. You love your customers. They're way more recession proof.
Yes.
Okay. The lower price, they're first to get hit and last to recover all the time. So it's not a playground you want to be on.
And those guys tend to not want to haggle, because if you're demonstrating your professionalism, your value-based differentiation, people know that you get what you pay for. Like you said, you can do it for 50, you could do it for 90, and I guarantee you the number of times you do it for 90, you're not discounting like you would be if you're doing it for 50. So there's more retained margin, right? Because, as soon as you're discounting, your retained margin as a proportion of your overall cost is huge.
And the discounting never stops.
No.
With the client. If you do it once, they're going to try to get you to go again. That's right.
Once that door's open, you can never get it shut again.
The camel's nose is under the tent. Okay, it's over.
It's a good way of putting it.
And it's funny because I always use this example too. So here's my contract. We go, anytime someone asks me, well, what's the cash price? They always want that. Like they want the discount because they're going to give you cash, the green stuff, And I'm like, I learned way long ago. I'm like, we don't do that. I said, I really can't hide that kind of money. I mean, it's $10,000. I'm like, I can't hide that kind of money. I got tax, I got the expenses. Because if you take that and you want that cash, they're not done. They're going to be your worst client. They're going to be the most picky. They want more off. They're going to want this. They're going to stand over your shoulder the whole time. I tell them, I go, it's not worth it. Give me the check. I have a great accountant. I have a great tax strategist. I have all this stuff in place. I'm good. I will save more doing it that way than you'll be able to take the discount for. So there's little things you'll learn over time.
What's the cash price? The cash price is 15% more. That's what it is.
That's it.
That's the cash price. 15%
well,
more.
I did get kind of snarky because I was pretty good at what I did and no one else could really do it. But you tell them, okay, it's going to be 22.5. How about 21? I go, how about 24? And I just look at them and we look at each other. Oh, a 22.5 would be fine. That's what I thought. Okay, great. That's my done for you price. That's done. I won't come to you ask for anything else. You'll have an amazing water feature. This to be done, everything else. And then one last one. I'd love to, since we're talking about this, you're out there working and doing your thing and you got machines and whatever. And someone goes, hey, while you're here, I got some bushes over there. I can do that. And I learned, like, people are like, what do you say? Well, I came up with the perfect thing. I said, absolutely, I can do that. Give me like 10 minutes. I'll take a look and I'll tell you how much more it's going to be. That's all you got to say. And they'll either say, okay, great. Or say, no, I just thought, well, you understand we're here. We're really focused on doing what we've been hired to do. And that's a distraction for my guys and the time. And it's really not going to work for us. It's going to detract from your main project. And they're good with that.
Well, Doctor, since I'm on the table anyway.
I got the spleen over here and it seems to be bothering me, right?
Right.
So yeah, exactly that. But I just love this, G, because I want people, I'm always trying to, and it seems odd that you have to keep explaining value. It should be a given. And I'll give you, when you talked about the websites earlier, here's the thing I did too. I went down, we built these beautiful custom homes. I'm like, okay, we go down this area and you got 4 or 5 high-end builders. I go, let's look at their websites. Okay. So we all pull each one up. They're pretty much, other than a different name, they're the same. They all do high quality work. Shocking! Right. I'm spending $3 million. You're going to do high quality work. I was looking for
sign me up. Who did crap work.
So where's that website, right? And all they do is talk about themselves. They never about their customer. Maybe they have some testimonials, but I mean, like, they're not solving the problem. They're not addressing the pain point. Anyone who's building their custom dream home has built other homes. And they know the nightmare that it can be, right? So I just found it really unique. So one of my clients, I'm like, so we are going to make you, when you talked about it, the message. It's the message. They all got a beautiful website. Well, his is better. He's got drone pictures. Ooh. Okay, we got to go with him. He used a drone. Like, no, there's no message there. It's so critical. So I'm really glad you hit on that too. But you see it all the time. Now everyone who's listening to this, G, this is the RAS, right? The Reticular Activating System. All you're going to see is these horrible websites, no message. You're going to look at your own and be all disappointed. But now you know how to fix it. You know what you should be focused on. So if you do whether you go to G or you go to someone else for an upgrade website, they better be talking about the message. Because if they're talking about fluffy, better pictures, more video, faster speeds, run, don't walk, right?
Yeah, they're coming at it from the totally wrong position. And I think this sea of sameness is very prevalent in pretty much every industry. And I think it's getting worse, not better, because of things like automation tools and AI and this sort of stuff, which is raising the floor of, bad execution, but it's not doing very much to the ceiling. The ceiling's staying at the same height. So it's gonna get worse before it ever gets better, even if it does ever get better. So this differentiation, value first, value forward, value articulation, is going to become more and more important as we have more and more providers that look and sound the same. You take 2 competitors from a particular industry, any industry, and you look at their marketing output. If you covered up their logos, what they say is pretty much interchangeable. And that's a problem.
That's the problem.
That's a real problem, right?
I think that the number one word from our whole time together today is differentiation. I teach you've got to, as a business owner, if you're thinking, and I don't just mean marketing, I mean the way you do business. Everything. The whole thing. It's got to be different, and it's not. You're not going to come up with it with one session on the whiteboard. Okay, I mean this is a process, and then it's not only coming up with what it could be. Now it's actually putting it in place. We talked about that whole journey. Every aspect of the funnel. What does this look like? I have a sales flow chart I created. I give my clients as a poster. There's 34 steps. Okay. And you look at it like, okay, when this happens, you go over here. And if this happens, you go over here, but you need to do this. And then when you're done, here's the unexpected and meaningful gift along this process. Here's when you ask for, like the whole thing. They're like, that's a lie. I go, that's the sales process. Right. Do you understand? It doesn't mean it's a day on everything, but I'm like, you have to understand all these steps. This is what separates you. Because you know all this. You know where to go regardless of the response. And you always get down to the final green box, which means you got that final check. You close it, you got it all, you finished, it's all a beautiful thing, and you start the process over. Here we go again. Now we begin the lifetime profitable value, right? What's next for that same customer you just went through?
Right.
Really great. Gee, this has been really enlightening. I really appreciate your expertise and just your thoughtfulness in this. I know you do this, been doing it for a long time as a living, but it's always nice to hear it articulated this way. So people really get kind of and I'm going to call it an unbiased look at this, because you're so well-rounded in this, you understand it. It's legit. It reminds me of one marketer. I heard her say, and I loved it. She said, and I'm kind of wrapping up with this, but she goes, listen, if you're coming to me with your last whatever money, your last $100,000, your last 10,000, your million, whatever, and it's like the last thing you have, and you need me to save your business, I'm going to send you away.
It's too late.
It's too late. She goes, you know what she said? This is the best part. You know what she said? You need to go knock on doors and sell your product.
Right.
She said, you need to go out. You need to go sell. You got to save your business. I can't save it. And I love that. I'm like, okay, I like this person. There's someone who has integrity, and they're going to tell you the legit. They're not going to be able to deliver results for you. And it wraps into kind of this conversation, whether it's the marathon, sprint talk, or anything else. Like, you have to understand what this is, okay? Like what this tool is, this marketing, I'm air quoting marketing tool. You have to understand what it is and the actual purpose, right? I think that's really important for people, because if they don't, they're just, as they say, the gap between expectation and reality is disappointment. You got to manage that gap, right? So that's kind of what you're doing. You're able to do that right up front. And I think that's really critical. People need to know that so they can make a really confident decision and then fully understand the process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. It doesn't seem to be a sort of common worldview, and I'm not quite sure why. Because, we look at things in a very sort of pragmatic approach for other areas of the business. But for marketing, it's sort of a little bit sort of wind through the fingers sort of thing, isn't it?
It is. It truly is. And you can talk to anyone who's in business for any amount of time. They'll all have their bad marketing story. They're all going to have their bad experience. Kind of like when people who get construction done, they've all got their story.
Absolutely.
It's not immune to, it's not only marketing. It's just everyone's got that stuff in a lot of areas. So let's do this, Gee. How can people kind of follow you, get in touch? You know the whole drill. You're the great marketer.
Sure.
If they want to talk to you regarding marketing, maybe employ you guys, whatever, go through a discovery call, whatever that takes, where should they go?
Best place to reach out to me is on LinkedIn. I spend most of my time there. Amazingly, you're going to find this pretty amazing, Richard, that there's only one Gee Ranasinha on LinkedIn. Can you imagine? Wow. Who would have thought?
And you're on my podcast.
There you go.
And you're on my podcast. I think I've hit I'm done. I think maybe I'll never do another. I'm finished.
Your work is done. Your work is done. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I post there often. I post twice a week. I post 1-minute videos about sorts of things, the stuff that we've been talking about today. Just sort of snippets, which hopefully educate and maybe even entertain people to take action within their business one bite at a time. That's the best place to get to me. Obviously, Kexino is the agency website, Kexino, KEXINO.com. That's where you can find us on the agency. And otherwise, Google me. I'm everywhere. I'll all over you like a cheap suit. You can't get
Love
rid of
it.
me once you find me.
Love it. That's what you want to hear from a marketer. If I can't find you, I'm going to have to question your marketing ability. So,
well,
awesome.
we gotta eat our own dog food, right?
That's right. And many don't. No. Coaches included. Okay, so we do what we teach.
There's the shoemaker's kid syndrome. There is a lot of that going on as well.
You bet. Well, Gee, this has been awesome. I appreciate the time. I know you had a long day up early today serving the world, because you're everywhere. The only G on LinkedIn. I've hit so many high marks. All my benchmarks in one episode I've hit. This has been just awesome.
I aim to please.
Yes, and you've done it. So thank you for the
the
time
opportunity.
today.
It's great to be on. I had a great time.
Absolutely. And for everyone else, we'll see you again on the next STS podcast.
And don't forget, revenue feeds the ego, profit feeds the family. So if you want to see how I can show you at least $100,000 in hidden annual profits in less than 3 minutes, and not only show you where, but how to create that 100K in 6 months or less without additional advertising or marketing spend, guaranteed, just go to sharpenthespiritcoaching.com. See how truly simple it is. That's sharpenthespiritcoaching.com. Do it now.